Welcome to another Under the Night Sky. My name is Robin. Tonight we're going to explore the constellation of Virgo the Virgin. I'll talk about how to find Virgo, provide some interesting facts about its brightest star Spica, describe some of the deep sky objects located in the constellation, and finish up with some of the myths associated with Virgo. By late May, the sun is setting just a little before 9. We'll need to wait about an hour after sunset, around 10, before it's dark enough to see Virgo high above the southern horizon. This is the best time of year to view Virgo, which happens to be the second largest constellation in the sky and one of the 12 zodiacal constellations. As Earth revolves around the sun, it appears as though the sun is moving around the sky. The circle that the sun appears to make through the sky is called the ecliptic, and it goes through a set of constellations we call the zodiacal constellations. The ecliptic is the apparent path of the sun, moon, and planets through the sky as seen from Earth. The ecliptic, in 9 degrees on either side of it, is the band of sky we call the zodiac. To find Virgo, remember this nifty mnemonic device: arc to Arcturus and spike to Spica. So what exactly are you doing? Find the Big Dipper and follow the arc or curve of the handle to the bright red star Arcturus in the constellation of Bootes. I've talked about the Big Dipper, Bootes, and arcing to Arcturus in a previous Under the Night Sky video about Bootes. From Arcturus, spike to Spica, the brightest star in Virgo. Using Spica, you can find the other stars that make up this constellation. Spica is the brightest star in Virgo and the 17th brightest star in the sky. The name is Latin, meaning the virgin's ear of grain or wheat. Pictures show Virgo holding an ear of wheat in her left hand. The star is located about 250 light years away. To the naked eye, and in telescopes, the star looks like a single star. However, it's actually a binary star system that formed around 12.5 million years ago. Spica A is a blue giant variable star of the Beta Cephei type, meaning the star shows small, rapid variations in its brightness due to pulsations on its surface. Spica B, the smaller star, is a spectroscopic binary, meaning that it's so close to Spica A, only 11 million miles separates them, that it can only be seen by separating their spectra. The two stars are so close that their pull on each other causes them to be egg-shaped rather than spherical. They orbit each other every 4 Earth days at about 56 miles per second. It's unclear whether the stars formed at the same time or separately and somehow ended up together. This image is an artist's interpretation of Spica A and B. Both Spica A and B are much larger, more massive, hotter, and brighter than our sun. Spica is part of 2 spring asterisms. An asterism is a pattern of stars we recognize, but it's not one of the 88 officially recognized constellations. The stars Spica, Arcturus in the constellation Bootes, and Regulus in the constellation Leo form the spring triangle asterism. The other asterism is the Great Diamond, or the Diamond of Virgo. This asterism includes the stars Spica, Arcturus, Denebola in Leo, and Cor Caroli in the constellation Canis Venaticis, the hunting dogs. The constellations Bootes and Leo have been the subjects of previous Under the Night Sky videos. When it comes to deep sky objects, Virgo has thousands of galaxies. We should call her the Galaxy Queen. This circle marks the location of the Virgo Cluster of galaxies. This cluster of galaxies lie 54 million light years away, and it's the heart of the larger Virgo supercluster. The Milky Way local group of galaxies is a member of this same supercluster. Containing some 2,000 galaxies, The Virgo cluster is made up of 3 subgroups in the process of merging to form one large cluster. The galaxies in this group are a mix of spirals and ellipticals. This is another image of the Virgo cluster showing the diffuse light between the galaxies. The reason it looks a bit like Swiss cheese is the bright foreground stars were removed from the image. Let's look at some of the galaxies inside this cluster, starting with M87. Located 54 million light-years away, M87 is a monster of a galaxy. It's home to several trillion stars, a supermassive black hole, and around 15,000 globular star clusters. For comparison, our Milky Way galaxy contains only a few hundred billion stars and about 150 globular clusters. You can see the myriad of star-like globular clusters scattered throughout the image. Being at the center of the Virgo cluster, M87 may have accumulated many of these globular clusters by gravitationally pulling them from nearby dwarf galaxies that seem to be devoid of such clusters. This Hubble image of M87 is a composite of individual observations in visible and infrared light. Its most striking feature is the blue jet near the center of the image. The jet is a supermassive black hole-powered stream of material that's being ejected from M87's core. This is one of nature's most amazing phenomena. As gaseous material from the center of the galaxy accretes onto the black hole, the energy released produces a stream of subatomic particles that are accelerated to velocities near the speed of light that stretch at least 4,900 light-years out into space. M87's black hole has swallowed up matter equal to 2 billion times our sun's mass. M87's black hole was the first ever to be imaged using the Event Horizon Telescope. This was the first direct visual evidence of the supermassive black hole at the center of M87. In this image, we see the shadow of the black hole, which is the closest we can get to an image of the black hole itself, an object that is completely dark and from which light cannot escape. The black hole's boundary, the event horizon, is the bright material surrounding and falling into the black hole. Now let's look at M104, an edge-on spiral galaxy. Called the Sombrero Galaxy, lying 28 million light-years away. In this Hubble image, we can see the white, bulbous core encircled by thick dust lanes. It's in these dust lanes that star formation is taking place. It's estimated to have nearly 2,000 globular clusters, and X-ray emissions suggest that there is material falling into a compact core where a 1 billion solar mass black hole lives. With a mass of 800 billion suns, it's one of the most massive objects in the Virgo cluster. Moving on, let's look at M61, a gorgeous face-on spiral galaxy. The spiral arms are threaded with dark lanes of dust and bright bands of stars. The arms are also studded with patches of ruby red light, the telltale sign of recent star formation. It's these red regions that classify M61 as a starburst galaxy. At that bright center is a supermassive black hole, some 5 million times as massive as our sun. M61 lies more than 52 million light-years away. One last galaxy, actually two, NGC 4567 and NGC 4568. Nicknamed the Butterfly Galaxies. Both are spiral galaxies having the classic spiral arms with dust lanes, stars, and star-forming regions. They're in the process of colliding and merging with each other, but aren't too distorted by gravitational tides yet, meaning they have just begun their dance. The pair are 52 million light-years distant. None of the galaxies I've shown you today are visible to the naked eye, but they can be seen in amateur-sized telescopes. Let's move on to some of the mythology. The origins of Virgo can be traced back to two Babylonian constellations called the Furrow and the Frond. The Furrow represents the goddess Shala and her ear of barley, and the Frond represents the goddess Arua and her date palm branch. The goddesses represent the two principal foods of Babylonia, dates and barley. The constellation of the Furrow symbolizes the barley fields in early autumn when they are about to be seeded, and the constellation of the Frond makes its appearance in the sky as the dates start to ripen on the branch. The Polynesians have a rich history of astronomy. Their knowledge of the stars allowed them to travel great distances over the South Pacific without getting lost. These seafaring Polynesians, or wayfinders, were the greatest ocean explorers of their time. To use the stars at night, wayfinders memorized the position of each star in the sky, allowing them to use the stars rising and setting as indicators of direction. On cloudy nights, when only parts of the sky are visible, they're able to recognize an isolated star or group of stars and imagine the rest of the sky. To help them remember the pattern of stars in the sky has been organized into 4 star lines, with each line taking up about a quarter of the sky. The bright star Spica in Virgo plays a part in the second star line, which is depicted as the backbone of a lizard. This star line starts at Polaris, the North Star, then goes to the star Dubhe and Alkaid in the Big Dipper, then to Arcturus in the constellation of Bootes, down to Spica in Virgo, and then down to the constellation of Corvus the Crow, and finally down to the Southern Cross, which is below our horizon. Arcturus is very important to the wayfinder, as it is the zenith star of Hawaii, which means it will be directly overhead when you're at the latitude of the Hawaiian Islands. In this Greek myth, Virgo is Dice, goddess of justice. Dice lived on Earth during the golden age of mankind when Kronos ruled Olympus. Spring was the only season. Food grew everywhere. Humans never grew old or had to work, and there was no sadness, crime, or war. It was a time of peace and happiness. During this time, Dice provided wisdom and justice. When Zeus came to power, the Silver Age began. During this time, humans began to quarrel and were not so kind to each other. It was during this age that Dice turned her back on mankind and took refuge in the mountains. With the coming of the Bronze and Iron Ages, humans descended into violence and war. Dice could no longer bear the sins of mankind. She left Earth and flew up to heaven, where she sits next to the constellation Libra, the scales of justice. This image of Virgo depicts her as Dice, holding the scales of justice. It's from an ancient manuscript titled Texts on Astronomy, written about 1,000 years ago. In this Greek myth, Virgo is Demeter, the corn goddess and mother of Persephone. During this time on Earth, it was always springtime. The god of the underworld, Hades, wanted Persephone to be his queen, so he kidnapped her. He rode out of Hades in his chariot, pulled by 5 black horses, grabbed her up, and raced back to the underworld. Demeter, not knowing what had become of her daughter, was overcome with grief. She abandoned her role as an earth goddess and searched for her daughter. While she was gone, the world's crops failed, the world grew cold, and the people starved. Demeter asked the great bear that never set if she knew what had happened to her daughter. She had seen nothing during the night and suggested that Demeter ask the sun. The sun told her what happened. Demeter angrily confronted Zeus and demanded that he order his brother Hades return Persephone. Zeus did as he was asked, but it was already too late, because Persephone had eaten some pomegranate seeds while in the underworld. Once she did this, she could never return to the land of the living permanently. A compromise was reached. Persephone would spend half of the year in the underworld with her husband, and the other half with her mother above ground. To this day, spring returns to the northern hemisphere when Persephone is reunited with Demeter, and winter returns when Persephone lives in the underworld. Well, that's it for this Under the Night Sky. Thank you for watching, and I hope you've enjoyed exploring Virgo the Virgin with me.